Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
So you know what the worst thing in the world is, Joel?
I can think of lots of things, but no, I want to
It,
hear what your idea is.
it's .NET. It's just the absolute
Oh boy,
worst.
come on.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just kidding. But I think I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, where there's so many different languages and so many different ways to solve stuff,
Mm.
and it's really easy to tribalize and get like in a certain groove of like the tools that I've picked are awesome and everything else is the worst.
Well, it kind of validates that you're making good decisions, right? Like it's a common mindset to have, and no one wants to be like, "Yep, I made a horrible decision." Love it.
Yeah, when there are people around you and then you use the same thing, it does feel good. Like, oh,
Hmm.
I made that smart decision. I
Sure.
can be more effective and efficient just like these people. But I think that is the nature of what you just said is the reason why there are different tools. Well, I
Yeah.
think there's a couple different reasons, but the first is there are different types of people, and different types of people think differently. We run into this all the time when me and you bicker back and forth. Even on the podcast, we've joked that I like to read the whole manual and you like to just like take something out and start messing with it and then go back and read parts, I think. It doesn't make sense to me. Like I was like, just read it all through. Once you have a base understanding, then do something differently. Well, if you look at that, that's almost like some of these different languages. Some
Hmm.
languages maybe are compiled, and so you can't even run them. They have to be compiled before you can run them. They have to be linked and all that kind of stuff. Others can compile at runtime, like PHP and JavaScript. Others have a certain environment that they're required to work in, like someone who works directly in like the Salesforce ecosystem can only do
Hmm.
their stuff inside of there, where others are open source, so you can kind of run them everywhere, like JavaScript or embedded languages. So there's just a number of different types of languages and things too.
Yeah. I just have to giggle a little bit because there's a phrase you say to me a lot, Aaron. Why would you ever do that? Like I'll be doing something on a screen share and you're like, I just don't understand why you're doing that. I'm like, I don't know. It's just what I do. But yeah, and I like your point too, because as you were going through that list, I think maybe it was when you said Salesforce, I like a shudder went through my body. And
Hmm.
I had that thought, like, oh, why would anybody want to use that? Being somebody who has had to use it on projects. But so I think it's a good point. And even like when we're in the midst of trying to be conscious of not having those reactions, I still had that reaction. So I think this is a good thing to think about.
Yeah, so these different languages, I guess the reason why these different languages are even made is like, why don't we all just write an assembly or something like that, right? Well, it's because developers and programmers already realize that there could be a quote better way to do something,
Hmm.
but it's better for them. It doesn't mean it's better for everyone. And so I
Yeah.
think about what's that one language that you really love, Elm?
Yeah.
Like that according to the developer that generated that language and a bunch of other people, that is a better way to do X, Y, and Z things, state related things, being
Hmm.
able to play stuff back and forth, functional programming, whatever. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying buzzwords.
No, you're doing
um,
fine.
but but for me, I don't I don't think like that. Like
Yeah.
you showed me a couple times,
Hmm.
and I mean, yeah, of course, a couple times I just picked on you because it's fun. But the majority of the time, I was picking on you because I was actually a little scared that I didn't understand what I was looking at,
Okay.
and I was like, "Well, then this is the worst. I'll just
Well,
call it the worst, and then that way I don't have to admit that I don't understand why this is better."
yeah, I think that you hit upon another reason why sometimes we might reject something is we just haven't even taken the time, or we've tried and it like the first attempt it didn't click for us, so therefore it must be dumb.
Yeah, I think that happens even in things that you like. Like I worked on Laravel projects and done stuff, and all of a sudden something clicked in my head where I'm like, oh, the last I don't know 2 years of programming, I've done that wrong, and I can do it a better way, a different way.
Hmm.
And so even on things that you know pretty well,
Yeah.
things will click in your head, and you'll like know the next level. You kind of
Sure.
level up on that. Well,
Yeah.
imagine if you don't know this thing at all. You're trying to get to that first hump. That can be pretty scary.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've talked about this in other episodes, but I think one other advantage, there's a few advantages of not hating on something. One of them that I'll share is that there are things to learn from other communities, even
Hmm.
even if it's like a drastically different approach overall. And a lot of what they do in that community wouldn't apply to what you do in your programming stack of choice. There's elements of that that might be kind of interesting. And so you mentioned Elm before. I know there are other JavaScript libraries. I think there's even been some work. I think I met a guy at Laracon one time that was doing something to try to bring some of the Elm data flow stuff even into Laravel. And so, like whether those end up being good ideas or not
I
is
just did
not
the
my
same
point.
thing. I just did the same thing as you do when
What?
you said bringing
Oh
that
no.
Elm stuff into Laravel. I was like, oh, why?
Yeah.
But why? Why not? Why not learn to maybe do something in a better way? Or
Yeah.
we try it and it's not, and then we say, hey, we tried it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but like to your point, your overriding point is if you just dismiss something and then you layer emotion on top of it. Oh, that's dumb. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're never going to see those opportunities. So I like the idea of keeping more of an open mind.
I can actually point to that happening with me, especially as I learned more JavaScript. So I would say way back in the day, I still focused on PHP and I was right on the back end. And I almost had that sort of attitude against front end developers. They don't know, right? They can't make anything. And so I learned a little bit more JavaScript and I'm like, actually, I like that you can kind of program in the front end too. Who knew that you could program in the front end? And then I started to do it more and I learned do object oriented sort of stuff. I saw that there's all these different ways to do what I was
Hmm.
doing, and then certain things made way more sense in my language stack of choice, PHP versus JavaScript. There's
Sure.
nothing wrong with making objects and stuff like that and constructors in JavaScript, but I tend not to use them anymore. In my JavaScript, I've learned to be a little bit more functional and compose things. But that sort of methodology I think has actually helped me understand how to write even cleaner PHP code as well.
Hmm.
So from a different language and its different paradigms, I picked up a few things that not only just opened my mind in general, but made my other language, I think, better.
Yeah, I mean that's a totally fair point. I still am in the camp of trying to avoid writing JavaScript, so I will leave that to you. But that's my own limitation. That's nothing against the language. I just like writing PHP more. Well, and I guess I don't know if you had any other advantages in mind, but like the one other one I thought of is just like don't be a jerk, right? I mean, I guarantee you, like especially as PHP developers, we should be most sensitive to this because PHP is kind of looked down upon by many other programming communities, and so
Right.
we've been on the receiving end of that. So like, why dish that out to somebody else? You know what? If someone loves Cold Fusion, great. You know, maybe they got a business consulting on it, or they work at a company that's generating revenue. Like, why even say something negative about it, even if you think its time has ended and it should go away? There's no benefit to like saying something negative about something that somebody else put their energy into and might enjoy doing.
Mhm. So from time to time, I'll go to random nature parks around here and go for a walk. I'm trying to be healthier,
Can
you
like
know.
nature park as opposed to like what a skate park or like what? That's
Well,
like
I live in a more urban area, so
okay.
there are parks that like you can't really walk in. I mean, you can,
Okay.
but like where it's just like a concrete jungle. I'm talking like go out to an area where there's green grass and like many
Got it.
acres.
So it's not a
Because
redundant phrase like hot water heater that I said today and then
oh
felt immediately stupid.
no.
Okay, sorry.
So I went out to this one nature preserve sort of area, and it's got this really cool thing. It's on almost the side of a hill. At the top, there's a couple of buildings where people can use, and then there's these walkways all the way down to this lake at the bottom of the hill.
Hmm.
And so I walked all the way down to the bottom of the lake, and it's cold out, and maybe there was ice on the path. I don't know. It's just I'm giving excuses for why it was so hard to walk back up the hill.
Okay.
So I'm walking back up the hill. It's kind of going zigzaggy, and over the edge of the hill, I start to see a pretty large A-frame building. So where it's basically the whole thing is like a roof. It's just
Hmm.
big A,
Yep.
and a lot of windows facing towards the lake. And I'm like, oh, I noticed that when I walked down, but I really hadn't thought about it. So I'm walking up this hill, and I'm not fit. So as I get closer and closer to the top of the hill, I'm really out of breath. And
Okay.
so I'm just like puffing and puffing. And the sun's out. So I'm getting really warm. And I get to the top of the hill. I'm looking at this amazing A-frame building. It's probably 2 stories tall. It's all glass. Sun is shining off of it. And I can see the clouds and the reflection. It's really beautiful, but I am out of breath.
Okay.
So I'm having a hard time, appreciating it. I got my sunglasses on. I get to the top and there's a bench there. So I lean on the bench, kind of almost backwards, put my
Hmm.
arms on the top, and I'm sitting there just breathing heavily and going, time to catch my breath. I'm staring at this amazing architecture. And then the sun goes behind the clouds.
Hmm.
And when the sun went behind the clouds, the reflection stopped on all of the windows on the front of the building.
Oh boy.
And I made eye contact with a row of elderly ladies doing some sort of exercise system. So basically, I had walked up this hill and then looked at them and stared at them according to their insight, and
Okay.
just breathed really hard and just panted at them, just staring right at them as they're trying to do their exercises, me having no idea. And then when the sun, I'm like, ah, and then just like look away.
Totally natural. I'm sure they weren't creeped out at all by that. Your story made me think of a time I was visiting a nearby city, and there's a harbor, and so there's like an old historical lighthouse that a friend of mine wanted to visit, and so we parked below it, and like we walked up. It felt like 10 flights of stairs straight up, and we were huffing and get to the top, and then we realized there was actually a road you could drive around, and we wouldn't have had to walk up all those steps. I felt like a total idiot. It's like I wasted all that effort.
All right. Well, jump on Twitter and tell us what you hate and why.
No, have you learned nothing from this episode?
Oh.
But if you would like some help, then head over to our website, nocompromises.io, and set up a call and we can see how we can help.